Hi there, world history students. This is Mr. Everton coming to you once more from beautiful Chez Everton. That means where Mr. Everton lives in French. That's what that means. I'm not in school today because I'm sick. Yeah, having a cup of coffee though. Maybe that'll help me feel better. Today we're talking about causes of European exploration, which is something we already talked about in class. So why did Europeans explore the Atlantic Ocean? Starting in the 1400s, the second half of the 1400s, European countries like Spain and Portugal, and then later France and England and the Netherlands, began sending explorers in ships out into the world. Why did that happen? That is our question for today. So we talked in class about Prince Henry the Navigator, second son of the King of Portugal, and how he knew that my cat is about to make an appearance. He's very curious about what's going on. He knows I'm talking to someone. We talked about Prince Henry and how he established what is called a school, but it wasn't really a school. It was really just that he paid money to smart people, scholars, to come to Portugal and design new maps and come up with new ship designs and to put together or synthesize a lot of the inventions that were coming out of the Islamic world and the Chinese world. So this ship, the Caravel, was designed, I mean, obviously it's a cartoon, but that's kind of what it looked like, was designed by Portugal, Prince Henry the Navigator School. It used elements from lots of different places. So lateen sails, those were perfected by the Islamic world, but originally came from Southeast Asia. The stern post rudder, which is, at the back of the ship in the water, allows the ship to be more maneuverable. We've talked repeatedly about the astrolabe, which allows you to calculate your line of latitude, the compass from China, which helps you determine your direction. And then knowledge of wind patterns and currents are really important. The Atlantic Ocean is not easy to navigate. The Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea are both places where the currents and the wind patterns are a lot more manageable, but out in the Atlantic, things were a lot more intense and harder to understand. And so it took Europeans a while to figure those things out. And also another thing that was coming out of the Islamic world and eventually coming out of Portugal were new maps and better understandings of the world and better understanding of geography. Now, every educated person in the second half of the 1400s knew that the world was round. Columbus did not come up with that idea. We'll get to Columbus in a minute, but everybody knew the world was round, but they did not know, what the shapes of continents were like. They did not know. And this is not a map of the world. This is a map of the Indian Ocean. This is a map from Zheng He, who was a Chinese admiral who was exploring the Indian Ocean. So, and that's just to say that maps were not very good, but they were improving. And with improved maps comes better ability to know where you are. And you really have to know where you are if you're sailing out across the sea out of sight of land, because if you calculate wrong, you could get lost and never get unlost and die. Like, that is the stakes. Those are the stakes. Like, if you mess up, you will die. And people were scared about it, understandably so. So why were they motivated to do this? That was the technology part, right? So what's the motivation? And again, we talked about this in class. The motivation is money. A lot of times people like to talk about the 3 G's, gold, God, and glory. Yeah, it's really just the gold part. We'll briefly address the other two, but it's really about the money. Gold is in Africa. There's a lot of silver in the Islamic world. There's cotton textiles, which are very valuable in India. There's spices in Southeast Asia. I feel like I've done this with you a bunch of times. These are all very desirable luxury goods. Europeans want to get their hands on them, but they can't because the Ottoman Empire is in the way. And there's 2 reasons why that's a problem for Europeans. One, the Ottoman Empire is a middleman. That means they're going to mark up the price, right? Like, whatever they get, they're going to get at a price, and they're going to mark it up and sell it to the Europeans. The Europeans don't want that. They want to be able to get direct access so they can get a better price. And then the other reason, as we've said in class, the Ottomans are Muslim, the Europeans are Christian, and they don't want to trade with the Muslims. So luxury trade goods are the motivation. Those are the reasons why Europeans want to explore the oceans. Europeans are just starting to come to a new sort of economics, which we'll talk about in a future video, called mercantilism, where their goal for their economy is to get as much gold and silver in the world. And their attitude is there's a limited amount of gold and silver, and we as a country need to have as much of that gold and silver as possible. They also want to make money by getting land that they can use to grow cash crops like sugar and cotton. Those crops don't grow very well in Northern Europe or in Spain. And so they would like to get some new land so that they can grow cash crops and make money off of those things. That's another reason. And then on top of that, I will say that there are people in Europe who want to spread Christianity, particularly the Catholic Church, which has just lost a bunch of believers to the Protestant Reformation. So here we see a Jesuit priest trying to convert some indigenous Americans. That did happen. There were missionaries, Catholic missionaries, converting people in Latin America, and we will talk about that in another video. I just feel like that's a secondary reason. I feel like the main reason is trying to make money. And spreading Christianity is also important to them. But, oh, I'm about to sneeze. See, I told you I'm sick. Hold on. Excuse me. And my cat knocked a can of club soda on the floor. So that's another thing. Let's talk about some specific explorers. Number one, we've got Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama is Portuguese. And let me turn my phone off. It's getting blown up. Please stop texting me. Vasco da Gama sailed for Portugal, and he is the one. Now, there were many people working for Portugal who accomplished sailing around the coast of Africa, but he's the one who gets all the credit because he's the one who finally sailed all the way around Africa and made it to India. And this allowed the Portuguese to gain access to the Indian Ocean Trade Network, and they started establishing trading outposts on the coast of Africa by force. They used gunships to take over cities on the coast of Africa and in India that they could use, and in Southeast Asia. And they established what we call a trading post empire, which we're not going to dwell on, but that is what it sounds like. They didn't take over a lot of Africa. They took over a few cities here and there in strategic locations. So Vasco da Gama sailed for Portugal around the coast of Africa. And then this is the one everybody knows. Christopher Columbus is the one. He's Italian. He went to the King and Queen of Spain with a plan to try to sail around the world in order to reach Asia, which is why when he stumbled into what is today Haiti and the Dominican Republic and Cuba, he referred to it as the Indies. He thought he was in Asia. And this discovery by Europeans of the Americas led to, pretty soon, the colonization of the Americas by the Spanish and the Portuguese, and then later the Dutch, the French, and the English. Ferdinand Magellan is the first man who gets credit for circumnavigating the world. And circumnavigate is just a fancy word for sail all the way around the world. That's what that means. So Ferdinand Magellan set out from Spain with a big group of, or was it Portugal? That's embarrassing. I'll correct it in class if it's wrong. Ferdinand Magellan set out from the Iberian Peninsula with a fleet of ships. By the time he made it all the way around, there was only one left, and he wasn't on it because he was dead. But the ship contained the first group of people to sail all the way around the world. And then another kind of explorer that you need to know is called a conquistador. And a conquistador is a general who works for the King of Spain and takes over large parts of the Americas for Spain. So one that you need to know is Hernando Cortez. And Hernando Cortez is the man who conquered the Aztecs. He murdered the Aztec king Montezuma and conquered them in 1519. And so that's, that basically was the beginning of Mexico, what is today Mexico, becoming part of the Spanish Empire. And then Francisco Pizarro was another conquistador who conquered the Incas a little bit later. Remember, the Incas are in South America, in the modern-day country of Peru. And so they were defeated and conquered by Francisco Pizarro, who is another conquistador. So, why did Europeans explore the Atlantic Ocean? Go forth and write 3 sentences and be good for your substitute, because they didn't ask to have to sub my class. It's probably some poor teacher who was told that, hey, we need you to cover, so like be good to them. Hope you're well. I will probably be back tomorrow. Have a good day.